Victoria Walsh believed in certainties. 25 years of marriage had given her confidence in life's predictability, the reassuring rhythm of shared routines, the familiar cadence of her husband Andrew's breathing beside her each night, the well-worn paths of their shared existence, until the day she discovered the antique wooden box hidden beneath the floorboards of his study. She hadn't been snooping. The pipe burst had sent water cascading through the ceiling, necessitating repairs to the warped wooden floor. Andrew was away at a medical conference in Switzerland, unreachable for the next 3 days, and the contractor needed immediate approval to proceed with the work. "Found this when we pulled up the damaged boards, ma'am," the contractor said, handing her a lacquered mahogany box, roughly the size of a large book. Tucked away nice and neat under the floorboards. Victoria stared at the object, perplexed. The craftsmanship was exquisite, the wood polished to a rich gleam, a small brass lock securing its contents. She didn't recognize it, had never seen Andrew with anything like it in their quarter-century together. "Thank you," she murmured, taking the box as the contractor returned to his work. That night, alone in their bedroom, Victoria studied the mysterious container. The key was absent, the lock resistant to her tentative probing. Common sense told her to wait for Andrew's return, to ask him directly about this peculiar hidden treasure, but intuition, that insidious whisper that precedes seismic revelations, urged her forward. A hairpin from her vanity, manipulated with trembling fingers, finally triggered the lock. The lid opened with an ominous creak that seemed to echo through their empty home. Inside lay meticulously organized documents, a birth certificate for Alexander James Harrington, born 18 years ago at Massachusetts General Hospital. A trust fund statement showing monthly deposits totaling over $2 million. School reports from an exclusive boarding school in Vermont. Recent photographs of a young man with Andrew's unmistakable eyes and confident smile. And beneath it all, a handwritten letter addressed to "my son" in Andrew's distinctive script, dated for the boy's upcoming 18th birthday, explaining why his father had lived a double life for nearly 2 decades. Victoria's hands turned ice cold as reality splintered around her. The husband she thought she knew, brilliant neurosurgeon, devoted father to their 16-year-old twins, faithful partner, had fathered another child, had financially supported him, tracked his development, maintained a secret connection while never breathing a word to her. The box contained more than documents. It held the devastating proof that the certainties Victoria had built her life upon were nothing but elaborate illusions. Victoria didn't remember screaming, but her throat was raw. She didn't recall hurling the crystal vase that now lay shattered across the bedroom floor, but her hand throbbed where she'd cut it on the jagged remnants. The evening had dissolved into a blur of rage and disbelief as she pored over the box's contents again and again, each review confirming the unthinkable reality: Alexander James Harrington. 18 years old this coming Friday, dark hair like Andrew's, same cleft chin, same confident tilt of the head in photographs. There was no denying the resemblance. The boy was unmistakably her husband's son. But who was the mother? Victoria spread the documents across the bed, searching for this critical piece of information. The birth certificate listed her as Catherine Ann Harrington. The name meant nothing to Victoria, triggered no memories or suspicions. Had Andrew known this woman before their marriage? During? Victoria checked the birth date against their own. Timeline. 18 years ago, she and Andrew had been married for 7 years. Their twins, Sophia and Ethan, had been toddlers not yet 2 years old. The realization hit her like a physical blow. Andrew had fathered this child while she was home caring for their babies. The betrayal was so complete, so devastating, that Victoria doubled over, a feral sound escaping her lips. Her phone rang, jolting her back to awareness. Andrew's face flashed on the screen, his regular nightly call from Switzerland. For a moment, Victoria stared at the device as if it were a venomous snake. Then, with deliberate calm, she silenced it and watched as the call went to voicemail. What would she even say? How was your day, darling? Oh, and I found evidence you've been living a double life for 18 years. The phone buzzed with a text. Message, everything okay? Unusual for you not to answer. Conference going well, miss you, love. Love. The word mocked her now. What kind of love maintained such a monumental deception? What kind of love systematically lied day after day, year after year? Victoria moved to her laptop, fingers trembling as she typed Catherine Ann Harrington into the search bar. Nothing relevant appeared. She refined the search, adding Boston, based on the Massachusetts birth certificate. This time, results emerged. A LinkedIn profile for Catherine Harrington, Senior Research Fellow at Dana-Farber Cancer Institute. Victoria clicked through, studying the professional headshot of an elegant woman with auburn hair and piercing green eyes. According to her profile, Catherine held an MD-PhD from Harvard Medical School, specializing in pediatric oncology research. Doctor, like Andrew, they would have crossed paths during his residency at Mass General. Victoria did the mental math. When Andrew was completing his fellowship in neurosurgery, this woman would have been in the same hospital system, had it been a brief affair or something more sustained. The documentation in the box suggested ongoing contact. School reports spanning years, photographs from various ages, the detailed trust fund showing regular deposits since birth. The letter prepared for the boy's 18th birthday implied Andrew planned to reveal himself fully once Alexander reached adulthood. Had he also planned to finally tell her? Or would that revelation have been carefully excluded, his two worlds kept separate forever? Victoria's phone rang again. Not Andrew this time, but their daughter Sophia calling from college. "Mom, is everything okay?" Sophia asked immediately. Upon Victoria answering, "Dad just texted me asking if I'd heard from you. Said you weren't picking up." Victoria closed her eyes, struggling to steady her voice. "I'm fine, sweetheart. Just busy with the contractors fixing the study floor. I must have missed his call." "You sound weird," Sophia persisted, ever perceptive. "Are you crying?" "Just a headache," Victoria lied, hating the ease with which the deception came. Was this how it started for Andrew? Small falsehoods that paved the way for larger betrayals? "How are your midterms going?" They chatted for a few minutes. Victoria, performing normalcy with an actress's skill, while her world continued to collapse internally. After promising to call Andrew back, she ended the call and immediately silenced her phone again. She needed time to think, to process, to decide her next steps before confronting the man who had shattered her reality. The wooden box sat on the bed, its contents now organized into neat piles. Financial records, school documents, photographs, the letter. Victoria reread Andrew's words to his secret son, searching for insights into her husband's mind, his justifications, his true character. "My dear Alexander," the letter began, "as you reach your 18th birthday, the time has come for complete honesty between us. You've known me as a friend of the family, a distant but caring presence in your life. The truth, which your mother and I agreed to keep from you until you were old enough to understand its complexity, is that I am your father." Victoria's eyes blurred with tears as she continued reading. Andrew explained the circumstances of Alexander's conception, characterizing it as a brief relationship during a difficult period in his marriage, and his subsequent decision to remain in Victoria's life while maintaining financial support and occasional contact with Catherine and Alexander. "Your mother never asked me to leave my family," the letter continued. "In fact, she insisted I remain with my wife and children, recognizing the devastating impact my departure would have had on innocent lives. We agreed that I would provide for you financially and remain a peripheral figure until you reached adulthood. Now that you're 18, you deserve to know the full truth, to make your own decisions about what relationship, if any, you wish to have with me going forward." The careful positioning made Victoria's stomach turn. Andrew cast himself as honorable, the man who did the right thing, by staying with his family while also taking responsibility for his other child. No acknowledgement of the profound betrayal, the years of lies, the fundamental breach of trust his actions represented. The letter concluded with expressions of pride in Alexander's accomplishments, hopes for his future, and an open invitation to connect more directly now that the necessary deception was ending. Necessary deception. The phrase burned in Victoria's mind. What had been necessary was honesty. What had been necessary was allowing her to make informed choices about her own life, rather than constructing an elaborate fiction for her to inhabit unknowingly. As dawn broke over their Cambridge home, Victoria had not slept. The contractors would return in a few hours to continue repairs on the study floor. Andrew would call again, increasingly concerned by her silence. Their children might become alarmed if she maintained this unusual incommunicado state. "I've imagined this conversation many times," Catherine admitted, wrapping her hands around her coffee cup, "though I always thought Andrew would be present." "Andrew doesn't know we're meeting," Victoria replied, her voice controlled despite the storm raging inside her. "He doesn't know I've found the box." Catherine's eyebrows rose slightly. "I see. That complicates things." "I need the truth," Victoria said simply. "The complete truth, not Andrew's carefully curated version. I believe I've earned that much after 25 years of unwitting deception." Catherine nodded, a flicker of what might have been guilt crossing her features. "You have. Where would you like me to start?" "The beginning," Victoria said. "How did you meet my husband?" Catherine took a deep breath. "We met during his neurosurgery. Fellowship at Mass General. I was a third-year resident in pediatric oncology. We collaborated on a challenging case, a 7-year-old with a brain tumor that crossed specialties." She paused, choosing her words carefully. "The case was difficult, emotionally draining. We worked closely for weeks, late nights, high stress. It evolved into something more. An affair," Victoria supplied bluntly. "Yes," Catherine acknowledged without defense. "It lasted approximately 2 months. When I discovered I was pregnant, I ended the relationship immediately." Victoria absorbed this, her mind calculating timelines. "This was during his fellowship, when our twins were babies." "Yes." Catherine met her gaze directly. "He told me he was married with young children. I knew exactly what I was getting involved with, and I have no excuses to offer you." The frank admission disarmed Victoria momentarily. She had expected denials, justifications, perhaps even blame directed at her or her marriage. Catherine's straightforward acceptance of responsibility was unexpected. "What happened when you told him about the pregnancy?" "He was shocked, as you might expect. Offered financial support for termination." Catherine's expression remained neutral, clinical almost. "When I made it clear I intended to continue the pregnancy, he was conflicted." "Did he offer to leave me?" Victoria asked, the question that had haunted her since discovering the box. "No," Catherine replied immediately. "Never. In fact, I made it explicitly clear that wasn't an option I would entertain. I had no interest in destroying your family." Victoria laughed bitterly. "How considerate, while engaging in an affair with my husband." "I deserve that," Catherine acknowledged. "The affair was inexcusable, a terrible lapse in judgment that I've spent 18 years atoning for. But I genuinely believed that Alexander deserved life, and you and your children deserved to keep your family intact. So instead, you and Andrew constructed this elaborate deception," Victoria said, anger edging her voice. 18 years of lies, of him maintaining a relationship with your son while pretending to be fully committed to our marriage. "The arrangement wasn't what I wanted," Catherine said, surprising Victoria again. "I asked only for financial support, which he insisted on providing. The trust fund, the involvement in Alexander's life, that was Andrew's choice. He couldn't bear to remain completely separated from his son." Victoria's hand tightened around her water glass. "Yet he could bear to lie to me every day for 18 years. "Yes," Catherine said simply. "That's the part I've never fully understood myself." A waiter approached, offering menus. Both women declined, requesting only coffee refills. When he departed, the tension between them remained, though somehow shifted, less adversarial, more united in confusion over the man who connected them. "Tell me about Alexander," Victoria said after a moment, surprising herself with the request. Catherine's expression softened visibly. "He's brilliant. Headed to MIT next fall for bioengineering. Compassionate, thoughtful, with Andrew's analytical mind, but a gentler approach to the world." She hesitated. "He believes Andrew is an old family friend, a mentor figure who's taken special interest in his education. The letter you found, I didn't know about that. Andrew prepared it for Alexander's 18th birthday this Friday," Victoria explained. "Apparently he planned to reveal himself as the boy's father." Catherine paled slightly. "Without consulting me, without warning you. That's—" She trailed off, shaking her head. "I'm sorry. This must be devastating for you." The unexpected empathy cracked Victoria's carefully maintained composure. 25 years, she whispered, blinking back tears. "I thought I knew him completely." After a moment, Catherine reached across the table, stopping just short of touching Victoria's hand. "For what it's worth, I believe he genuinely loves you and your children. The affair was his failing, not yours." Reality demanded decisions. Would she confront Andrew immediately, over the phone, while he was an ocean away? Wait for his return in 3 days to face him in person? Contact Catherine Harrington directly? Tell their children about their half-brother? Each option felt impossible, inadequate to address the magnitude of what had been broken. 25 years of marriage, the foundation of her adult life, revealed as fundamentally compromised. Every anniversary they'd celebrated, every renewal of vows, every intimate moment shared, all occurred while Andrew maintained this monumental secret. Victoria showered mechanically, the hot water failing to penetrate the ice that seemed to have formed around her heart. She dressed in a simple black dress, applied makeup with particular care, armor against the day ahead. Then she returned to her laptop and composed a brief email to Catherine Harrington. "Dr. Harrington, my name is Victoria Walsh. Yesterday I discovered documentation regarding your son Alexander and his relationship to my husband, Andrew Walsh. I would appreciate an opportunity to speak with you directly. My contact information is below." She hesitated before hitting send, questioning whether this direct approach was wise. But the need for truth, unfiltered by Andrew's careful narrative, overrode her caution. She pressed the button, sending her request into the digital void. Next, she texted Andrew. "Contractors found something interesting under the study floorboards. We need to talk when you're free. No emergency." The deliberate vagueness would alert him without revealing how much she knew, giving her the advantage of watching his response. His reply came almost immediately. "What did they find? Are you okay? I can step out of this session if you need me." Victoria smiled without humor. "Just some old box. We'll discuss when you have time. Focus on your conference." Let him wonder. Let him worry. Let him experience even a fraction of the uncertainty that now defined her existence. As she prepared to face the contractors and maintain the facade of normalcy, Victoria's phone chimed with an email notification. Catherine Harrington had responded. "Already, Mrs. Walsh, I've been expecting this conversation for 18 years. I'm available to meet today if that works for you. I believe you deserve the complete truth." Victoria stared at the message, her heart racing. The woman's immediate response and straightforward tone surprised her. No denial, no defensiveness, just an acknowledgement that this moment had been inevitable. She replied quickly, suggesting a cafe in Brookline, neutral territory away from both their homes and workplaces. Catherine confirmed within minutes, agreeing. To meet at noon. 4 hours. 4 hours until Victoria would sit face to face with the woman who shared a child with her husband. The woman who had known about Victoria for 18 years, while Victoria had known nothing of her. The woman who might hold the missing pieces of this devastating puzzle. As the contractors arrived and began their work, Victoria moved through the morning like an automaton, her mind fixed on the approaching meeting. Andrew called twice more. She let both go to voicemail, unable to trust herself to maintain the deception in real-time conversation. The drive to Brookline passed in a blur. Victoria parked near the small cafe, checking her reflection in the rearview mirror. She looked remarkably composed for a woman whose life had imploded overnight. Only the tightness around her eyes and mouth betrayed the turmoil within. Catherine was already seated at a corner table when Victoria entered, easily recognizable from her professional photograph, though her hair was shorter now, streaked with premature silver. She stood as Victoria approached, extending her hand with a directness that suggested medical training. "Mrs. Walsh," she said, her voice low and steady. "Thank you for suggesting we meet." Victoria accepted the handshake automatically, studying the woman who represented the fracture in her marriage. Up close, Catherine Harrington looked tired, the kind of bone-deep exhaustion that spoke of long hours and heavy responsibilities. There was no hostility in her expression, only a wary respect. "I think," Victoria said as they both sat, "given the circumstances, you should call me Victoria." And with that simple statement, she stepped fully into this new reality, one where her husband's betrayal had created unexpected connections that she now had no choice but to navigate. The cafe hummed with lunchtime conversation, a jarring backdrop of normalcy for the extraordinary meeting unfolding in the corner booth. Victoria studied Catherine's face, searching for traces of her husband's attraction to this woman. The elegant cheekbones, the intelligent eyes, the confident posture of someone accomplished in her field. "That's small comfort now," Victoria replied. "Tell me, how often has he been in Alexander's life? The photographs, the school reports. He attends major school events, graduations, science fairs when Alexander was competing. Perhaps 3 or 4 times a year, always presented as a family friend, a mentor." Catherine sipped her coffee. "Alexander admires him greatly, though he has no idea of their true connection." Victoria tried to reconcile this with the man she knew, the husband who never missed their children's events, who seemed fully present in their family life. How had he managed these parallel existences? How many medical conferences and emergency surgeries had actually been visits to his secret son? "Does Alexander know about me? About Sophia and Ethan?" "He knows Andrew has a family," Catherine confirmed, "but only in the vague way you'd know about any family friend's personal life. No details, no connections." Victoria nodded slowly, processing this information. And now Andrew plans to tell him everything, to acknowledge him publicly. "Apparently so," Catherine said, concern evident in her tone. "Though how he intended to manage the fallout, he likely assumed I would never find out," Victoria said bitterly, "that he could maintain his carefully separated worlds indefinitely." "Perhaps," Catherine conceded, "though the letter suggests he planned to be more open about his connection to Alexander once he turned 18. I'm not sure how he thought that would work without you learning the truth." A thought struck Victoria suddenly. The box, hidden under the floorboards of his study. Why there? Why not in a safe deposit box if he wanted to keep it secure? Catherine considered this. Maybe he needed it accessible, somewhere he could review the contents, add to them over the years. Or perhaps, Victoria said slowly, on some level, he wanted it to be found. Needed the deception to end, but couldn't bring himself to initiate that conversation. They sat in silence for a moment, 2 women contemplating the complex psychology of the man who had irrevocably altered both their lives. "What will you do now?" Catherine finally asked. Victoria had been asking herself the same question since the moment she'd opened the box. Divorce seemed the obvious answer, the appropriate response to such a profound betrayal. Yet 25 years and 2 children complicated that simple solution, as did the existence of Alexander, this innocent young man about to have his own world upended. Andrew returns from Switzerland in 2 days, Victoria said. I'll confront him then. After that, she shook her head. I honestly don't know. And Alexander's birthday? The letter? Victoria hadn't considered that immediate complication. The boy's 18th birthday was only 3 days away. Andrew had prepared for a revelation that would forever change Alexander's understanding of his identity. I don't know, Victoria admitted. That should be your decision, I think. Alexander is your son. Biologically, he's Andrew's son too, Catherine pointed out gently. And now that you know, you're involved whether we like it or not. The harsh reality of that statement settled over Victoria. This wasn't just about her marriage anymore. Her children had a half-brother they'd never met. A young man who'd grown up without knowing his father's true identity was about to have that protective fiction stripped away. Perhaps, Victoria suggested, a plan forming. We should postpone any revelations to Alexander until we've had time to consider the implications fully. Until I've had a chance to confront Andrew and decide my next steps. Catherine nodded slowly. That seems reasonable. Though containing this may be challenging once you've spoken with Andrew, he may react unpredictably. Yes, Victoria agreed, thinking of her husband's controlled exterior and the emotional volatility she occasionally glimpsed beneath that carefully maintained facade. He may indeed. As their conversation drew to a close, Victoria felt an unexpected connection to this woman who should have been her enemy. Catherine had been honest, forthright, even empathetic, qualities Victoria would need to navigate the choppy waters ahead. Thank you, Victoria said as they prepared to leave, for your candor, for meeting me like this. You deserved the truth. Catherine replied simply. She hesitated, then added, would you like to see a current photo of Alexander? Something more recent than what was in the box? The question caught Victoria off guard. Did she want to see this young man, this living embodiment of her husband's betrayal? The product of an affair that had occurred while she was home with infant twins, yet curiosity won out. Yes, she said, I would. Catherine pulled out her phone, scrolling briefly before turning the screen toward Victoria. A handsome young man grinned at the camera, mortarboard askew on his dark hair, high school graduation robes billowing slightly in the wind. The resemblance to Andrew was unmistakable. The same eyes, the same cleft chin, but there was something softer in his features, perhaps from Catherine's influence. More striking was his similarity to Ethan, Victoria's son. They could easily have been identified as brothers by strangers on the street. He's attending MIT in the fall, Catherine said, a mother's pride evident in her voice despite the tense circumstances. Biomedical engineering. Ethan is at Harvard, Victoria found herself saying, neuroscience, following his father's interests. The two women looked at each other, the bizarre connection between them solidifying in this exchange of maternal pride. Their sons, half-brothers, unknown to each other, attending universities minutes apart, pursuing related fields, carrying the same genetic legacy. This is going to be complicated, Catherine observed unnecessarily. Yes, Victoria agreed, for all of us. As she drove home, Victoria's mind raced with possible scenarios, contingency plans, approaches to the inevitable confrontation with Andrew. The controlled anger that had sustained her through the meeting with Catherine began to give way to a deeper fury as the reality of Andrew's betrayal fully registered. Not just the affair. That had been brief, according to Catherine, a lapse that even Victoria might eventually have forgiven had it been confessed at the time. No, the truly unforgivable aspect was the 18 years of calculated deception that followed. The double life Andrew had constructed and maintained while presenting himself as the perfect husband and father. How many lies had he told? How many family events had he missed for fabricated reasons that actually involved his other son? How? Could she ever trust anything he said again? Victoria pulled into their driveway, the beautiful colonial home they'd purchased 15 years ago, suddenly feeling like a stage set, the physical manifestation of a marriage that had been partly performance all along. Her phone chimed with a text from Andrew. "Getting concerned by your silence. Called the contractors who said everything was proceeding normally with the floor. What's going on? Should I come home early?" Victoria stared at the message, contemplating her response. The thought of Andrew cutting his trip short, of having to confront him before she was fully prepared, sent a spike of anxiety through her. She needed these 2 days to strengthen her resolve, to decide her approach, to determine what she wanted from the inevitable confrontation. "And no need to interrupt your conference," she typed carefully. "Everything is fine here." The box contained old medical journals. "Nothing important. Busy day with errands. Will call tonight." The lie came with surprising ease, a small taste of the deception Andrew had practiced for 18 years. Victoria felt a momentary twinge of guilt, then reminded herself of the magnitude of his betrayal compared to this minor falsehood. Inside the house, she found the contractors finishing the floor repair in Andrew's study. The space where the box had been hidden was now covered with new hardwood, indistinguishable from the surrounding floor. As if the physical evidence of deception could be so easily erased, so seamlessly repaired. "All done, Mrs. Walsh," the lead contractor said. "Good as new." Victoria nodded, thanking him mechanically as she wrote a check for their services. When they departed, she stood alone in Andrew's study, surveying the space he had claimed as his sanctuary within their home. His medical diplomas lined the walls. Family photographs crowded his desk, including one of Victoria and the twins from a beach vacation years ago, all three smiling broadly at the camera Andrew held. Had he ever felt guilt looking at their innocent faces while maintaining his elaborate deception? Had he ever considered the devastation his secret would cause if discovered? The mahogany box now rested in Victoria's closet, hidden among her winter sweaters. The evidence it contained, the documentation of Andrew's betrayal, was preserved, awaiting the moment of confrontation. 2 more days until Andrew returned, until she could look him in the eye and watch his carefully constructed world collapse around him. 2 more days to decide whether 25 years of marriage could survive such a fundamental breach of trust. The next 36 hours passed in a surreal haze. Victoria maintained her facade of normalcy, answering Andrew's calls with practiced nonchalance, discussing mundane household matters while the weight of his betrayal threatened to choke her. Each conversation was an exercise in self-control, her voice steady, even as her free hand clenched into a white-knuckled fist. "The contractors finished the floor," she told him during their evening call. "Everything's back to normal." The irony of her statement wasn't lost on her. Nothing would ever be normal again. "Excellent," Andrew replied, his voice carrying the warm, confident tone she'd once found so reassuring. Now it grated, knowing how thoroughly that confidence had masked his deception. "I've been thinking about our anniversary trip. What do you think about Kyoto in the spring? We've always talked about seeing the cherry blossoms." Victoria nearly laughed at the absurdity. Planning a 26th anniversary celebration when she wasn't certain their marriage would survive the week. "Sounds lovely," she managed. "We can discuss when you're home. Planning trips, discussing renovations, maintaining the fiction of their perfect life together. Had this been Andrew's experience for 18 years? This constant compartmentalization, this exhausting performance? After hanging up, Victoria returned to the dining room table where she'd spread the contents of the mahogany box. She'd spent hours studying the documentation of Andrew's secret life, the careful record of his son's existence kept hidden beneath their home. The financial statements revealed the extent of Andrew's support. Monthly transfers to a trust fund, established in Alexander's name, the balance now exceeding $2 million. Victoria had always believed they shared complete financial transparency. Now she wondered where this money had come from, how Andrew had hidden these substantial regular payments from their joint finances. She pulled out their tax returns, bank statements, investment accounts, searching for discrepancies, for evidence of the parallel financial life Andrew had maintained. There, his quarterly bonuses from the hospital had always been deposited directly into their joint account, except for what he claimed was automatically diverted to his 401k. Had that been his source? Had he been siphoning portions of his income for 18 years to support his secret son? The more Victoria investigated, the more ingenious Andrew's deception appeared. He'd created a financial infrastructure that supported his second family while remaining virtually undetectable within their shared finances. The calculated nature of the arrangement chilled her. This wasn't a momentary lapse, a single mistake. This was sustained, deliberate, methodical deception spanning nearly 2 decades. Her phone chimed with a text from Catherine. "Alexander's birthday dinner is Friday night. Andrew confirmed his attendance last month. I've told Alexander that our family friend sends his regrets. Unavoidable hospital emergency." Victoria stared at the message. Another piece of the puzzle falling into place. Andrew's conference in Switzerland had been scheduled to end Thursday night. He would have returned Friday morning, ostensibly exhausted from international travel, but actually freeing him to attend his secret son's birthday celebration in Boston. The elaborate choreography of his double life continued to unfold before her eyes. "Thank you for letting me know," she replied to Catherine. Their unlikely alliance still felt strange, but Victoria found herself grateful for the other woman's straightforward communication. At least someone was being honest with her now. Sleep eluded Victoria that night, her mind racing with questions, scenarios, rehearsals of the confrontation to come. By morning, she'd made a decision. She would speak with her children before Andrew's return, not to reveal the full truth, not yet, but to prepare them for the inevitable family earthquake. Sophia was the easier call. Her daughter was perceptive, but less emotionally volatile than her twin brother. Victoria arranged to meet her for lunch near her college campus, the neutral setting, offering some buffer for the difficult conversation ahead. "Mom!" Sophia waved from a table at the corner bistro, her dark hair, so like Andrew's, pulled back in a casual ponytail. At 20, she had Victoria's fine features combined with her father's intense focus. "This is a nice surprise. Everything okay at home?" Victoria embraced her daughter, inhaling the familiar scent of her shampoo, wondering how this cherished child would handle the impending revelation that she had a half-brother, only 2 years older than herself. "Everything's fine," Victoria lied, settling into her seat. "I just missed you. Wanted to check in before midterms consume you completely." They chatted about classes, Sophia's roommate drama, her ongoing debate about switching majors from psychology to pre-med. Victoria listened attentively, treasuring this last normal interaction before the truth would forever alter their family dynamic. "Actually," Victoria said as their meals arrived, "there is something I wanted to discuss. Your father and we may be going through some challenges in the near future." Sophia's fork paused midway to her mouth. "What kind of challenges? Are you guys fighting?" "Not yet," Victoria said carefully, "but I've discovered something that will require some difficult conversations. I don't want to go into details right now, but I wanted to prepare you. Things might get complicated at home for a while." Sophia's perceptive gaze, so like her father's it was momentarily disorienting, fixed on Victoria's face. "Are you and Dad getting divorced?" The directness of the question caught Victoria off guard. "I don't know," she admitted. "I truly don't know yet. That depends on many factors, including how our conversation goes when he returns tomorrow." "It must be serious if you're warning me in advance," Sophia observed, setting down her fork. "Is Dad having an affair?" Victoria hesitated. Technically, the affair had ended 18 years ago. What had continued was something different but equally devastating, a sustained deception, a secret family maintained alongside their own. "It's complicated," she finally said. "And I promise to explain everything once your father and I have spoken. I just didn't want you and Ethan to be blindsided if things become difficult at home." Sophia reached across the table, taking Victoria's hand. The role reversal, daughter comforting mother, brought unexpected tears to Victoria's eyes. "Whatever it is," Sophia said firmly, "I'm here for you, Mom. We both are." Victoria squeezed her daughter's hand, overwhelmed by love for this remarkable young woman. "I know, sweetheart, and I'm so grateful for that." Meeting Ethan proved more challenging. Her son was in the midst of labs and study groups, his pre-med schedule leaving little flexibility. They settled for dinner at his apartment near Harvard, Victoria bringing his favorite lasagna from the Italian restaurant they'd frequented since his childhood. Where Sophia was perceptive and measured, Ethan was passionate and protective. His relationship with Andrew had always been intense. Shared intellectual interests, similar career paths, the special bond between a father and son who saw reflections of themselves in each other. Victoria dreaded how he would react to learning about Alexander, not just the betrayal aspect, but the existence of another son who shared his father's DNA, his intellectual gifts, his path toward medicine. "You're being weird, Mom," Ethan declared halfway through dinner, setting down his fork. "What's going on? Is someone sick? Is it Grandma?" Victoria shook her head. "No, nothing like that. Everyone's healthy." She repeated the same vague warning she'd given Sophia, that challenges were coming, that she and Andrew would be having difficult conversations, that she wanted him prepared for potential upheaval. Unlike his sister, Ethan demanded specifics. "This is ridiculous. Just tell me what's happening." "I can't, not yet," Victoria insisted. "Your father deserves to hear this from me first, to have an opportunity to explain himself." "Explain what?" Ethan pressed, his frustration mounting. "Mom, you're scaring me. Whatever it is, it can't be that bad. Dad's like the most boring, predictable guy on the planet." The irony of her son's statement hit Victoria like a physical blow. Andrew Walsh, respected neurosurgeon, devoted family man, pillar of the community, had cultivated that exact image. Boring, predictable, trustworthy. The perfect cover for a life built on systematic deception. "Sometimes," Victoria said carefully, "people surprise us, even those we think we know completely." Ethan studied her face, his expression shifting from frustration to concern. "You're really serious about this?" "Yes," Victoria confirmed. "I am. But I promise, once your father and I have talked, I'll explain everything." By the time Victoria returned home that night, emotional exhaustion had set in. She'd laid the groundwork with her children, prepared them as best she could without revealing the bomb that would soon detonate in their family. Her phone chimed with a text from Andrew, "Finished conference dinner. Calling it an early night since I have the crack of dawn flight tomorrow. Can't wait to see you, my love. Missing you terribly." Victoria stared at the message, the endearment sending a wave of nausea through her. Had he texted something similar to Catherine before heading to Alexander's school events? Had he maintained this performance of the devoted husband even while actively participating in his secret son's life? She didn't reply. Instead, she returned to the mahogany box, extracting Andrew's letter to Alexander once more. Tomorrow was the young man's 18th birthday. In Andrew's original plan, he would have returned from Switzerland and attended the birthday dinner, presenting this letter that would forever change Alexander's understanding of his identity. Now, thanks to Catherine's intervention, Andrew would arrive home to find his secret exposed, his careful plans derailed, his double life finally collapsing around him. Victoria wondered how he would react, with denial, with justifications, with remorse. Would he attempt to salvage their marriage, or would the revelation of his secret son make that impossible? 25 years together, 2 decades of what she'd believed was a solid, honest partnership. How could she ever trust him again? How could she look at him without seeing the elaborate deception he'd maintained? How could their children process the existence of an older half-brother they'd never known? Yet beneath the anger and betrayal, Victoria found herself thinking of Alexander. This young man had grown up without knowing his father's true identity, believing Andrew was merely a family friend with a special interest in his development. Tomorrow, he turned 18, the age Andrew had determined appropriate for revelation of the truth. Instead, that revelation might never come, or might come in a context of family upheaval Andrew had never anticipated. The complexity of the situation overwhelmed her. There were no clean solutions, no paths forward that didn't involve pain for innocent parties, her children, Alexander, even Catherine, who had maintained the agreed-upon fiction for 18 years, now caught in the implosion of Andrew's carefully constructed world. Victoria poured herself a rare second glass of wine, carrying it to the master bedroom, the room she'd shared with Andrew for 25 years. Tomorrow he would return, his flight scheduled to land at 11:37 a.m. By noon, he would be home, expecting the normal rhythm of their life together to resume. Instead, he would find the mahogany box on the kitchen table, its contents neatly arranged. The evidence of his betrayal laid out in chronological order. And Victoria would be waiting, 25 years of trust broken, but her resolve intact, determined to face whatever came next with the same strength that had sustained her through this week of devastating discovery. She rehearsed her opening lines, discarding approaches that seemed too emotional, too accusatory, too weak. Finding the right words to confront a quarter-century of deception proved nearly impossible. In the end, she settled on directness. "I found Alexander's box," she would say. "I know everything. I've spoken with Catherine. Now I need to hear from you why you've lied to me every day for 18 years. As Victoria finally drifted toward sleep, her phone chimed one final time. Andrew, sending a picture of the sunrise from his hotel window in Switzerland. "Last morning, away from you," his message read. "Coming home to my one and only love." Victoria turned off her phone without replying, tears finally breaking through her carefully maintained composure. Tomorrow would bring answers, confrontation, the beginning of whatever came next. But tonight, she allowed herself to grieve for the marriage she had believed in, the husband she had trusted completely, the life that had been partly illusion all along. Outside, rain began to fall, a gentle drumming against the windows of their Cambridge home. The sound had always soothed her, but tonight it felt like the universe weeping for all that would be lost when morning came. At precisely 12:17 p.m., Victoria heard Andrew's key in the lock. She sat motionless at the kitchen table, the mahogany box open before her, its contents arranged in perfect chronological order. Financial statements, school reports, photographs, the birthday letter, evidence of 18 years of deception laid bare. "Victoria," Andrew called, the familiar sound of his suitcase wheels on the marble foyer. "I'm home." She didn't respond, listening to the rhythmic approach of his footsteps. The moment suspended, her last breath of life, before the revelation. Andrew appeared. In the doorway, still handsome at 53, silver threading his dark hair, smile fading as he registered her expression and the items spread across the table. "Victoria." Confusion, then dawning recognition as his gaze fixed on the mahogany box. The blood drained from his face. "Where did you—" "The contractors found it under the floorboards," she interrupted, her voice steadier than she'd expected. "When they were repairing the water damage in your study." Andrew remained frozen in the doorway, a man witnessing the collapse of his carefully constructed world. "Alexander James Harrington," Victoria continued, lifting a photograph. "Your son, 18 today, headed to MIT in the fall. The son you've been visiting for years, while telling me you were at conferences." She met his eyes directly. "The son you conceived with Catherine Harrington while I was home with our infant twins." "Victoria, I can explain." "I've spoken with Catherine," she cut him off. "I know about the affair. I know about your arrangement. I know you've maintained a relationship with Alexander his entire life while hiding his existence from me, from Sophia, from Ethan." Her voice finally cracked. 25 years of marriage, Andrew. 25 years I thought were built on honesty and trust. Andrew's shoulders slumped as he sank into the chair opposite her. I never meant to hurt you, he whispered. Yet here we are, Victoria replied. My entire understanding of our marriage shattered because you couldn't be honest about your responsibilities. I was trying to protect everyone, he insisted. Catherine, Alexander, you, the twins. No, Victoria countered. You were protecting yourself from consequences, from difficult conversations, from having to reconcile the separate lives you've maintained. She lifted his letter to Alexander. You were finally planning to tell him the truth. Were you ever planning to tell me? Andrew's silence was answer enough. Catherine said the sustained involvement was your choice, Victoria continued, that she only asked for financial support, not your presence in Alexander's life. He's my son, Andrew said defensively. I couldn't just pretend he didn't exist. Yet you expected me to live in ignorance. You denied our children the chance to know their half-brother. Victoria shook her head in disbelief. How, Andrew? How did you justify this to yourself for 18 years? As Andrew began his explanations, the rationalizations that had allowed him to maintain his deception for nearly 2 decades, Victoria watched him with clinical detachment, as if observing a stranger. The husband she had loved, had trusted, implicitly, had built a life around, was revealing himself to be someone she had never truly known at all. Andrew moved out that evening, taking only a suitcase of clothing and essential items. The conversation had stretched for hours. His justifications, her questions, the gradual unraveling of 18 years of systematic deception. I'll stay at the Marriott, he said from the doorway, his confident posture now diminished by revelation. Until we figure out next steps. Victoria nodded, emotionally drained yet oddly clear-headed. I'll tell the twins tomorrow. They deserve to hear this from me first. Victoria, Andrew hesitated. I know this changes everything, but I hope you understand I never stopped loving you. The affair was a terrible mistake, but our marriage has been real. Real, Victoria echoed. A real marriage requires honesty, Andrew. What we had was a carefully staged performance. Alone that night, Victoria called Catherine. He's gone, she said simply when the other woman answered. Moved to a hotel. And Alexander's letter? Catherine asked. He won't be delivering it. Not yet. Victoria stared out the window at the life she'd believed in just days ago. Your son deserves the truth, but on his terms, not because Andrew's deception finally caught up with him. Thank you, Catherine replied, for considering Alexander in all this. Victoria surprised herself with her next question. Would you and Alexander join us for dinner next weekend, with Sophia and Ethan? I think it's time they all knew about each other. The silence stretched before Catherine answered. Are you sure? No, Victoria admitted. But continuing separate lives, continuing secrets, that's Andrew's approach. I need something different. After they disconnected, Victoria sat alone in the dark, contemplating the path ahead. Her marriage might be beyond saving, the trust destroyed, too thoroughly for repair. But perhaps from its ruins, something unexpected might emerge. Honesty, finally. A complex, blended family, her children knowing their half-brother. Not the life she'd planned, but perhaps one worth building nonetheless. The restaurant Victoria selected was private, upscale enough to ensure discretion, but relaxed enough to ease the tension of this unprecedented gathering. She arrived first, securing the secluded corner, table she'd specifically requested when making the reservation. Sophia and Ethan arrived together, their faces solemn, after yesterday's devastating revelation. Victoria had told them everything. The affair, Alexander's existence, Andrew's 18 years of deception. Their reactions had been painfully predictable. Sophia's quiet tears, Ethan's explosive anger, followed by stunned silence. Are you sure about this, Mom? Sophia asked now, glancing anxiously toward the entrance. Meeting them so soon? Victoria squeezed her daughter's hand. I think it's necessary, Alexander has lived his entire life not knowing who his father truly is, not knowing about you. That ends now. Dad should be here, Ethan muttered, still processing his anger at his father's betrayal. This is his mess. Perhaps later, Victoria replied, but today is about you three, about siblings meeting without the complications of your father's presence. Catherine and Alexander arrived precisely on time. Victoria recognized the young man immediately from his photographs, tall like Andrew, with the same intense eyes that had been passed to Ethan as well. He looked nervous, confused by this unexpected dinner with strangers. Victoria, Catherine greeted her with the awkward familiarity of their unusual connection. This is Alexander. Introductions were made, explanations carefully presented. Alexander's expression transformed from confusion to shock as he realized these people weren't family friends, as he'd initially assumed, but his biological father's other family, his half-siblings. I don't understand, he said, looking between his mother and Victoria. Dr. Walsh is my father, and you've known all along? This directed at Catherine. Yes, Catherine admitted. It was wrong to keep this from you. We thought we were protecting you, but... Protecting me? Alexander's voice rose slightly. By lying about who my father is? By letting me believe he was just some family friend interested in my education? The pain in his questions mirrored the betrayal Victoria and her children still processed. Different perspectives on the same deception, the same man's elaborate lies. As the awkward dinner progressed, something unexpected emerged. Beneath their shock and shared sense of betrayal, the three siblings found common ground. Alexander and Ethan discovered their mutual interest in medical research. Sophia made Alexander laugh with stories of growing up with her twin brother. You have his laugh, Alexander told Ethan, the observation both connection and reminder of their shared biology. By dessert, phone numbers were exchanged, tentative plans made for campus meetups, given their university's proximity. The foundations of relationships entirely separate from Andrew's deception were being laid. Watching them, Victoria felt a strange sense of rightness amid the wreckage of her marriage. Andrew's lies had denied these siblings the chance to know each other for 18 years. That, at least, was one wrong she could help correct. As they parted outside the restaurant, Alexander approached Victoria hesitantly. "Thank you," he said, "for arranging this, for not blaming me for everything." Victoria smiled gently at this young man who was as much a victim of Andrew's deception as anyone. "None of this is your fault, Alexander. And while I don't know what happens next with your father, I hope you'll stay connected with Sophia and Ethan." He nodded, glancing toward his half-siblings waiting nearby. "I'd like that." Driving home alone, Victoria contemplated the uncertain future ahead. Her marriage might be beyond saving, the trust destroyed too thoroughly by decades of systematic deception. But perhaps from its ruins, something unexpected might emerge. Truth, finally. New connections. A different kind of family than the one she'd thought she had. Not the life she'd expected at 52, but perhaps one worth embracing nonetheless. Andrew stood on Victoria's doorstep 1 month after moving out. His appearance noticeably changed. The confident surgeon seemed diminished somehow. His clothes less crisp, dark circles shadowing his eyes, his normally perfect hair slightly unkempt. "Thank you for agreeing to see me," he said, as Victoria led him to the living room, the formality between them still strange after 25 years of intimacy. "The lawyer sent over the initial separation agreement," Victoria replied, gesturing to the document on the coffee table. "I thought we should discuss it in person." Andrew nodded, his gaze drifting to the family photographs still displayed on the mantel. A new addition had appeared among them, a picture of Sophia, Ethan and Alexander at a recent Red Sox game, their faces reflecting cautious joy in their new connection. "They seem to be getting along," he observed quietly. "Yes," Victoria confirmed. "They meet weekly now. Alexander and Ethan discovered they're taking similar biochemistry courses at their respective universities. Sophia's introducing Alexander to her friend group. She paused. He's a remarkable young man, Andrew. You should be proud of him. Andrew's eyes filled with unexpected tears. I am. I've always been proud of him. He hesitated. Have you spoken with him directly? About me? Some, Victoria admitted. He has questions only you can answer, but he's not ready to see you yet. Catherine says he's still processing the deception, feeling betrayed by both of you. Andrew nodded, accepting this painful reality. And our children, how are they doing? Processing, Victoria said simply. Ethan's anger is gradually subsiding. Sophia is more philosophical, trying to understand how you justified the deception for so long. They sat in weighted silence, the remnants of their shared life surrounding them, artwork chosen together, furniture that had witnessed their happiest moments, photographs documenting what Victoria had believed was a perfect marriage. I never stopped loving you, Andrew said finally, his voice breaking. The affair was brief, meaningless, a terrible mistake, but everything with you, with our family, that was real, Victoria. She studied the man she'd shared her life with, searching for the husband she'd thought she knew completely. Perhaps the love was real, she conceded, but a marriage can't survive without trust, Andrew, and I don't know if I can ever trust you again. He nodded, unable to argue with this fundamental truth. What happens now? Victoria sighed, the question she'd been asking herself for weeks. We move forward. Separately, but connected through our children, all three of them now. As Andrew left, separation agreement signed, Victoria felt an unexpected lightness. The path ahead remained uncertain, but for the first time since discovering the mahogany box, she faced the future with clarity rather than confusion. Some betrayals couldn't be overcome, some trust couldn't be rebuilt. 25 years of marriage had ended, not with dramatic accusations, but with quiet recognition of an insurmountable breach. Yet from its ashes, new connections had formed. Three siblings finding each other, a complex family reconfigured around truth rather than deception. Not the ending Victoria had ever imagined, but perhaps not entirely an ending after all. Rather, a different beginning than the one she'd planned. 6 months later, Victoria stood in the crowded auditorium at MIT, watching Alexander receive an undergraduate research award. Sophia and Ethan flanked her, applauding enthusiastically for their half-brother. He looks nervous, Sophia whispered, as Alexander approached the podium for his acceptance speech. Wouldn't you be? Ethan replied. Dad's here? Victoria glanced toward the back of the auditorium where Andrew sat with Catherine, their first public appearance together at one of Alexander's events. The divorce had been finalized 2 months earlier, amicable in legal terms, but emotionally complex for everyone involved. Alexander thanked his professors, his research partners, then paused. And my family, he continued, his gaze finding first Catherine, then Andrew, then shifting to Victoria, Sophia, and Ethan. All of my family, who've taught me that truth matters, even when it's difficult, especially when it's difficult. The pointed comment caused Andrew to wince visibly, but he maintained his supportive smile, accepting this subtle rebuke as part of his penance. At the reception afterward, Victoria found herself standing beside Catherine at the refreshment table, their unlikely alliance having evolved into something resembling friendship. He's thriving, Catherine observed, watching Alexander laughing with his half-siblings across the room. They all are, Victoria agreed. It's remarkable, really, how quickly they've bonded. Their conversation was interrupted by Andrew's approach, hesitant as he always was now in Victoria's presence. Congratulations, Victoria said, her tone polite but distant. Alexander's research is impressive. Your scientific mind, clearly. Andrew nodded, accepting the observation without taking undue credit. Victoria, I wanted to let you know I've accepted the position at Johns Hopkins. I'll be moving to Baltimore next month. The news wasn't entirely unexpected. After the scandal of his double life, had become known within their social and professional circles, Andrew had found Boston increasingly uncomfortable. The prestigious offer from Johns Hopkins provided both career advancement and necessary distance. "That's good," Victoria replied sincerely. "A fresh start. I'll fly back regularly to see the kids," he added. "All of them, if they're willing." Victoria nodded, noticing how Andrew included Alexander in this statement, no longer compartmentalizing his children, his responsibilities. Perhaps he was finally learning. Later, as Victoria drove home with Sophia and Ethan, she reflected on the strange new normal they'd established. The pain of Andrew's betrayal hadn't disappeared, but it had evolved into something manageable, integrated into their family narrative rather than defining it. "Dinner next weekend?" Sophia asked, as they pulled into the driveway of what was now just Victoria's home. "Alexander wants us to meet his new girlfriend." "I'd like that," Victoria replied, smiling at her daughter. Entering the house alone, Victoria was struck not by emptiness but by possibility. At 52, she was building a life she'd never anticipated, centered on her children, her rediscovered passion for architectural design, and the hard-won wisdom that came from surviving betrayal. The future stretched before her, unwritten. Not the future she'd planned during 25 years of marriage, but one entirely her own, shaped by truth rather than illusion. It was enough. 1 year to the day since finding the mahogany box, Victoria hosted dinner at her home, a gathering that would have been unimaginable 12 months earlier. Sophia and Ethan helped in the kitchen, arguing good-naturedly about the proper amount of garlic in the pasta sauce. Alexander set the table with his girlfriend Maya, who had been warmly welcomed into their expanding family circle. Catherine arrived with a bottle of wine and a hesitant smile, their unusual friendship still occasionally awkward, but genuine. Andrew came last, bringing dessert from the bakery they'd frequented throughout their marriage, a peace offering of sorts. "Everyone's here," Sophia announced, ushering them toward the dining room, where photographs now chronicled a more complex family. Narrative, original images of Victoria and Andrew with the twins, newer ones including Alexander, candid shots of the 3 siblings together, a family expanded rather than diminished by truth. Conversation flowed with surprising ease, centered around the children's achievements, Alexander's research breakthrough, Ethan's medical school applications, Sophia's summer internship. Victoria observed the scene with quiet wonder, her ex-husband, his former lover, their respective children, all sharing a meal at her table. Not the family she'd thought she had, but family nonetheless. "A toast," Andrew suggested as they finished dessert, raising his glass. "To honesty, to new beginnings." Victoria met his gaze across the table, acknowledging what remained unspoken. Between them, the betrayal that had ended their marriage, the painful growth that had followed, the unexpected connections forged from broken trust. She lifted her glass, adding her own silent addition to his toast, to survival, to rebuilding after devastation, to the strength she hadn't known she possessed until her world shattered and she reassembled the pieces into something new. Later, as guests departed, Andrew lingered in the foyer. "Thank you," he said quietly, "for making this possible, for allowing me to remain connected to all of them despite what I did." Victoria studied him, the man she'd loved for 25 years, the stranger who had maintained an elaborate deception, the father now attempting to integrate his fractured responsibilities. "I didn't do it for you," she replied honestly. "I did it for them, for all 3 of our children." Andrew nodded, accepting this truth. "You've handled this with extraordinary grace, Victoria, far more than I deserved." "Perhaps," she acknowledged, "but dwelling in anger serves no one, especially not me." As she closed the door behind him, Victoria felt the familiar sense of completion that had gradually replaced her initial devastation. The pain hadn't disappeared entirely. Such betrayal left permanent marks, but it no longer defined her. The mahogany box still resided in her closet, a tangible reminder of discovered truth and its aftermath. She rarely opened it now, no longer needing its evidence to confirm what she had accepted, that 25 years of marriage had ended not because love had faded, but because trust had been irreparably broken. Yet, from that broken trust had emerged unexpected gifts: her children's relationship with their half-brother, her own rediscovered independence, even this unconventional extended family that gathered now on holidays and special occasions. Victoria moved through the quiet house, straightening chairs, gathering wine glasses, restoring order. At 53, she stood at the center of a life rebuilt from the ruins of deception, stronger for having been broken, wiser for having survived betrayal, more authentic for insisting on truth. Not the life she had planned, but unquestionably, finally, her own.